Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. The show today, we've got two guests on. Our first guest is going to be Michael Bell. He just took over the morning radio show on KFYR and does so at an interesting time in North Dakota politics. I mean, it's always an interesting time when you're on the cusp of a new election year, but there are pieces moving in state politics. There's pieces moving in national politics. There's a lot of things. We don't know what's going to happen. We have the Iowa caucuses in roughly a week, less than a week. There's a lot of things that can move nationally. There's a lot of things that are moving locally. I mean, Governor Burgum any day now should be making a decision about a third term. So it's an interesting time to get in. Michael joins us, as does my co-host Chad Oban, who I remembered to introduce this time. And then coming up in the second half of the show, State Senator Tom Campbell is going to be on talking about whether or not Doug Burgum, will he or won't he? Somebody who definitely is in the doesn't want him to camp is Tom Campbell, who really would like to be governor. He's going to be joining.
Know, Rob. He might want him to run because he's ready to take him on because evidently Governor Burgum's pretty weak.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, $7 million strengthens your spine really quickly.
Well, that's Michael. That's Michael you're here talking. Mike, you had your first official show on KFYR. How'd it go?
I did. It was a blast. We scooped the national networks. Which was great. Kelly Armstrong was calling in from the ante room outside the hearing room where they were marking up the Biden impeachment inquiry. And Hunter Biden walked in the room. And Kelly announced that on the radio. And about 8 minutes later, Fox News announced it. So we got my listeners got the scoop of the century, as I'm calling it.
Michael, all downhill from here, man.
I know, right?
Yeah, day
You're
one.
Right.
That's a loud note to hit on day one. I will tell you, I've done a lot of talk radio in the past. I enjoyed it. I liked the callers. I liked talking to guests. I like doing the podcast. I'll tell you, the thing I don't miss is having to worry about commercial breaks. There's no getting around it. That's part of the radio business. But I will tell you, it's nice to start an interview here on the podcast. And we can just talk as long as we need to talk. And I don't have to be looking at my watch saying, all right, hurry up, shut up. I just asked you a really complex question. Answer in 30 seconds, and then I got to go. You don't have to do that. It's great. But it's really great. What made you want to do talk radio?
They asked me. I've never contemplated doing talk radio. They came to me and asked me, and I thought it was a great idea. I always thought my voice was lent itself more to print media, but I was convinced otherwise, and I leapt at the opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity. I didn't realize that it was, one of my life goals professionally, and it has proven to be a really great experience, and I thank the people from iHeart, from KFYR, for their unconditional support in me taking this opportunity, because I don't have a background in radio.
So, Michael, you don't have background. How'd you get the job? Who are you? What do you hope to accomplish?
Who am I? Okay, well, my name is Michael Bell, and my first foray into North Dakota was in 2005. I made my first trip here. I represented North American Coal in Washington. I was North American Coal's lobbyist for about 17 years in Washington. I started coming to North Dakota, and the first time I came, I went back to Washington, D.C., and I said, North Dakota is my favorite state. And it's my favorite state because the people are rugged individualists who will give you the shirt off their back without you even knowing you need it. They are just some of the finest people I've ever had the pleasure to encounter. I've worked in 30 states and I've been to 48 states. I have a unique perspective. I think, North Dakota remains my favorite state.
What do you think about some of the things going on right now? I mean, you're taking over. You're going to be a fairly loud voice in the state's media now, at a time, and a right of center voice. I think it's fair to say, at a time when the party nationally is split along Trump-shaped fault lines. I would say the party within the state is split. I mean, these are interesting times, to be involved in political commentary, and these are interesting times to be, in a part of the conservative movement. What do you see out there? What do you make of all this?
Well, first of all, my goal on the show is to glorify the Lord every day and every show. Following that, I want to honor the guests and callers, and I want to make sure that there is a voice and an avenue for everybody. There are far too many voices right now which are parroting other voices. And so it's an interesting time to be trying to break through the masses. I did some work for Donald Trump. He was my boss at one point. I had dinner with him. I had a private dinner with him years ago, and then I helped write his energy platform in 2016. I was personally invited to his inauguration in 2017, which I attended. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for people who put their names on the ballot. I don't have anything bad to say about Donald Trump, but I will say that he is not really a Republican and certainly not a conservative. That said, this is a fascinating time to be in elective politics and to be a Republican. There is really a fault line between a lot of the conservatives, and there is an attempt to wrap some in bubble wrap, and there's an attempt to yell and scream and have that be conservatism. I remember very clearly in 2009 that the litmus test one on how conservative you were was how many mean things you could say about President Obama. And believe me, I disagreed with the man as much as anybody did. I helped kill his cap and trade bill. But saying something mean about a sitting president does not a conservative make.
So, Michael, with that being said, I mean, obviously you and I know each other. Our better halves served in the Senate together.
They did.
I see you as somebody who's thoughtful, that can have a conversation with people on the right and the left.
Hey, just to be clear, says Chad, Michael is married to former state senator Jessica Bell. Just to put that out there.
Yeah, both are former senators.
Former
senators.
senators.
I'm happier for it.
Best decision I ever made.
Yeah, well, Michael, I find you thoughtful. Again, like you said earlier, you and I probably don't agree on a lot of stuff. Is that an equation for success on talk radio, right? I mean, talk radio historically has been a place where you have to be bombastic. You need to make news. You need to make people angry to get callers in. How do you make it work when you just want to have conversations with people like Rob and I about policy and how to make the world a better place?
Well, because it's not personal, it's business. I started listening to Rush Limbaugh in 1991 and listened to him throughout his entire show. The first thing that Rush did was he unpacked issues. There was no name calling. There was no minimizing, I should say. There was no bullying. He was a true intellectual, and he demonstrated that with every show. That's what I aspire to. I want to unpack.
You must be talking about Rush Limbaugh at the beginning of his career, maybe, because there was certainly a lot of name calling and bullying going on at the end of his career.
That's a fair point. I actually stopped listening to him at one point, but he really is the gold standard for talk radio, and he launched talk radio, conservative talk radio, I should say. Now, Chad, you and I have the utmost respect for you. For where you come down on issues, and while we disagree, we don't disagree where the problems are. We just disagree on the efficiency of the solutions, and that's why it's not personal. You have a pathway for success for a broken issue, I have a pathway for success on a broken issue. But we both agree that there's a broken issue. And I think that's the first part. The second part is that while I like to think that I'm the smartest person in any room I walk into which I walk in, I am not. And there are plenty of people out there who have really good ideas about resolving some of the issues which are before us today.
Michael, you said that interesting. Chad brought up the point of having having to be bombastic or divisive or what have you to be successful in talk radio. I would argue, I mean, it even extends to, written punditry, which is a lot of what I do. I've done both, where I have been both on, talk radio and doing, obviously writing. And I can tell you there's a lot of people in this business who go into that saying, I have to get eyeballs by writing something that's just over the top, by being just super partisan, being super salacious. I would argue in talk radio, because you have to do the show every single day. I mean, there's that next, I mean, your show ends, the clock's ticking to the next one, right? I know all about that. You have to have guests, you have to have topics to talk about. And some days there's not a lot going on in the world, at least not on your beat. And I think the temptation there is for some to just make some stuff up. Like, I'll just feign outrage about something, or I'll just try to, put a stick in a beehive. And I don't think that that's productive. I don't think that that's healthy. I like to think that I've done a pretty good job. I mean, not that I'm above making people mad. I don't worry about making people mad. I'm not trying to make people mad, I guess, that's always been my approach. Like, I'm not trying to make you angry, but sometimes I might tell you something that makes you angry, but I'm not telling it just to get a reaction. I'm saying it because I think it's true. And I think there's a difference in that. Like, I think there's plenty of room for some sharp elbows and some tough talk sometimes that's still premised on the idea that you're not evil, you're just wrong, which is how I usually like to look at people who disagree with me. You're not evil, you're just wrong.
Well, that's a very good point. And historically, the Democrats have historically thought that Republicans were evil, and Republicans thought that Democrats were just wrong. That's a bit of trite cliche, and not completely true, though there is some truth to it. But the way I look at it is, I'm in this for the long haul. I'm not in this to separate myself on day one from the other talented professionals on the earth. I'm also, it's very important. Facts matter to me. And so when somebody says, for example, that all politicians are corrupt, that drives me up a wall. Because number one, facts matter. And if you don't know who, which, and when a politician is corrupt, then you have no business showing an interest in it. Your opinion is important, but your opinion is not as important as you think it is, as many people think it is, because facts matter. And if you're not willing to name names and talk specifics, then I don't really have a use for you. The second part of that is there are times when my listeners, my friends, my colleagues, my compatriots are interested in stuff that does not matter. Why we have, this overinflated sense of we need to have an opinion on everything, and it needs to be cynical and it needs to be erased to the bottom, is beyond me. And that's what the show is going to bring. The show is going to bring optimism and truth to what I see is a lot of noise, a lot of cynicism, and more importantly, a lot of people who are looking for something good. They're looking for something good from the news cycle, from the 24-hour news. And that's what we intend to bring by talking about local issues and not necessarily national issues. So my background is in national politics. I've been in professional politics for 35 years.
Michael, I grew up in Bismarck, and KFYR was sort of it was the linchpin, right? It was the highest standard for radio. I remember growing up, and on the way to school, KFYR was on the radio, and Al Gustin was telling me about a bunch of farm reports that I didn't understand or care about. My parents driving to grandma's in New Rockford, we'd listen to KFYR and they'd listen to crappy oldie songs, which was probably only from 20 years prior, which now I think about the music I listen to and it's all oldies.
I know. And now it's considered classic rock, for crying out loud.
Right. I don't listen to KFYR anymore. And I think that it's because, and I understand that you just went to work there, so I'm not trying to set you up to say something bad, but it did become a place where I didn't feel like the information I got from the different talk shows on KFYR was accurate information. It was often based in conspiracy and that kind of thing. How do you bring somebody like me or somebody who, likes talk radio generally, but didn't find maybe your predecessor's show and some of the other shows useful? How do you convince me to turn it to 5:50 a.m. to listen to your show when I'm a long ways away from I'll tell you, the only time I listen to 5:50 a.m. is during election time, so I can hear who's running radio ads. Right? Yeah. So how do you bring me back? How do you bring people back who just don't like the conspiracy, that kind of stuff?
Chad, we raised the bar. We raised the bar of intellectual discourse. This is not rocket science here. We are entertaining and informing people. And I don't want to allow for a canvas to be painted with negativity and with cynicism and with conspiracy theories. Because, first of all, if you're looking at any conspiracy theory to have arisen out of Washington, D.C., you're barking up the wrong tree, because nobody in Washington can keep a secret. I spent 20, almost 25 years in Washington, D.C., and I can tell you that nobody can keep a secret. So if you have 1,000 people who are purporting to have engaged in a conspiracy, then you are dead nuts wrong. The other thing too is that I'm tired of the they. They control this. They do this to us. They are controlling. There is not a cabal of people in Washington. Believe me, if there were, I would still be in Washington, because I'd be one of those people. But there's not a cabal of people in Washington who are pulling levers in order to get people to do things that they want. It doesn't work that way. That's not how our Constitution was set up. That's not how our founding fathers imagined that the United States of America was going to be. So we raise the bar, and we require transparency, and we require honesty, and we require an intellectual discourse, and facts matter.
One of the things that's dominated this vocation that you and I have now chosen is a culture war. And it fascinates me, because I think and for a long time, I would say that even I fell for it a little bit, but I think there's, and I don't know if it's particularly acute in the digital age with social media and everything, but there's this feeling that I have to be defensive if I feel like somebody else is invading my culture or maybe living a way that I don't like. And I think a lot of it is, you turn on Fox News and you hear about a professor at some college in the Northeast or something, or the Southeast or the West Coast, wherever it is. And some professor, and they're doing something that's just kind of outrageous, or they say something that's outrageous. And I think it fits into what you said about the they thing, where they become part of the they. And then it's this, well, this is happening everywhere. And there's not a lot of work that's put in to say, well, is it actually happening here? Or is it this one nutty professor out there? Now, sometimes I think it's true. I think what we saw after Hamas attacked Israel, I think we saw some things on American college campuses that are very troubling. And some tolerance for anti-Semitism on the left. I think that's a valid thing.
College campuses. You're talking about intersections.
Right.
That were shut down. You're talking about freeways that were down throughout the country. Now, is that going to happen here in North Dakota? I think the more people that are aware of those types of circumstances become vigilant in ensuring that it doesn't. But we don't need to have an opinion on what a college professor says, or I shouldn't say we don't need to have an opinion. We can certainly have an opinion, but there is no need to get upset about what a college professor at UCLA said to his or her students at a period of time supporting something you don't support. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect your life materially. And I feel, me personally, I like to live in a world where facts, science, and letting people be themselves matters. And if someone, and you bring up a very good point here, if someone in the state of Washington wants to wear, if a man wants to wear women's underwear, fine. If somebody wants to check out a book, if a man wants to check out a book from a library, fine. As long as they're consenting adults, fine. That's the essence of freedom to me, is being cognizant and conscious of that which is most problematic to you, but recognizing that it's critically important as a freedom.
Michael, you're bringing up things that are really interesting to me, because watching the last probably 2 legislative sessions, I've often
the
been...
North Dakota legislative sessions, or the...
What's that?
The North Dakota legislative
the North Dakota legislative sessions, right. Yep. And I will tell you, I'm often struck by the big government Republicans that are serving the legislature. And I think to myself, am I more of a libertarian than they are? Because I think people should be able to check out the books they want. I think people like the underwear. I don't care what clothes people wear. I just don't care about that. And so when you brought up like the UCLA professor that you shouldn't get worked up because that doesn't affect your life, you know what else you shouldn't do? Try to pass a law in North Dakota in order to respond to the UCLA professor who did something you don't like.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day, where like one thing that really upset me is there were some college campuses that were passing like policies where if you misgendered somebody, you'd be punished. And I didn't like that. I thought that was a little heavy-handed. I think everybody should be courteous and respectful to each other in the workplace and as human beings, but if you can't achieve that, at the very least in the workplace. But on the other hand, then we can bring it back to North Dakota. It's like, well, we've got to fight this pronoun stuff by putting in a bill that punishes teachers for using the wrong pronouns. And I mean, I'm looking at that like, how is that not just the other side of the coin?
Yeah, and that's what I refer to as the woke right. I am an original conservative. I am a William F. Buckley conservative. I'm a Ronald Reagan conservative. Ronald Reagan didn't give 2 flying fucks about what somebody wore underneath. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, that's all right. That's all right. It's a podcast. This is not the FCC. You better be careful with during your day job, though.
I just saw your eyes go up, and I was like, "Oh, whoa!"
I'm so thrilled. I'm not the first one to drop an F-bomb on this podcast.
Well, neither of you are the first one. I am, but
okay, well, that's fair. So we're just following your lead, is all we're doing.
Yeah,
So Ronald Reagan didn't care what a man wore underneath his suit, nor did he care what a woman wore underneath her suit. It doesn't matter, because it's immaterial to how you live your life and how I live my life. Like if someone, let's take the LGBTQ issue. There was an effort, a very strong effort, from the very beginning to banish all LGBTQ people from North Dakota. I mean, in not so many words, there was a very strong effort to marginalize a community, an entire community. And it occurred to me that it just doesn't matter, because people are people, and who they choose to love and who they choose to spend time with and who they choose to play ball with doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my life. It doesn't materially affect my life. Now, that said, this is only for adults. And if you're over 18 and you're making a conscious choice, then that's fine. But if you're a legislator and you want to restrict men or teenage boys from participating in teenage girls' sports, should you not let the counties, who are a bastion of and in the middle of the consequences, shouldn't you allow them the latitude to do it instead of a state law or a federal law?
Yeah, and I think what you touch on there is you can't just dismiss the culture wars entirely, because at times there are legitimate policy questions that come up, such as how do we handle when somebody who is transgender, who transitions, however legitimate or just, what are they? They've transitioned. They now think of themselves as a different gender, and they want to participate in sports in the gender they identify with. How do we handle that? And how do we do it in a way that's fair to the people already participating in that sport, but also fair? I mean, and that's, to me, but
testosterone plays a big deal. Testosterone plays a huge
right.
deal.
And I don't want to go down that road and have a debate about that and how legitimate. I mean, to your point, I mean, we have school boards and we have high school associations and we have all these things that are set up to handle this. To your point, why does the legislature need to come in with its flaming sword of big government and make a decision for everybody?
That's exactly right. Why does the legislature think they're smarter than the county elected officials, the school boards? Why do they think they're smarter and they have a better grasp on an issue than the people who are dealing with it at the ground level?
I don't know. Arrogance.
Yep, and it is arrogance, right? I mean, why should the state legislature determine what's best for a community they don't live in?
See, Dad, you are a libertarian. I see it.
Yeah, I know. And again, I mean, going back to local control, that's generally a pretty conservative principle that I feel like I stand up for more than a lot of Republican legislators stand up for. It's crazy.
Amen. And, I mean, we're talking about, if you want to talk about book bans, okay. First of all, the people who are responsible for banning books in history have never been the good guys, ever. And second of all, and I do not have a problem with an adult section of a library. Don't have a problem with that at all. But if you're going to ban books, and I'm a devout Christian, but if you're going to ban books, the Bible goes first, because Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, sex. Genesis chapter 4, verse 25, murder. This is in the first 10 pages of the Bible.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk about
Sure.
banned books, you have to have a real conversation about
Right. And there's nothing, I mean, we all, and that was during the book ban. We gotta get moving here. But during the book ban battles, we already have processes in place to curate the content in libraries. Yes. And we have library boards and everything else, and we can handle this. We can say, okay, well, this book that was written for teenagers is a little edgy, so maybe parents have to sign off on that one getting checked out. That's a fair compromise that we can arrive at without accusing librarians of being groomers. But
right. Also punishing librarians. I mean,
right.
Librarians in North Dakota listen, I sit on a library board in my community. I've had a library card for every city I have ever lived in my life. I love libraries. Holding librarians responsible for the content of libraries exclusively is unconscionable.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Michael, good luck. I'll tell you, I love this job. I don't obviously do the talk radio part of it very often anymore. Although I am going to be on your show tomorrow. And you have
whoa. What about the Oban bump?
Hey, I'm bringing your wife on first. She's much more important to me.
Yeah,
she has a way bigger Oban bump with Aaron than with Chad.
There you go. That's exactly right. He's booked me for I think 3 segments, wisely or unwisely. I guess we'll see how it goes. I love this job. I mean, it can earn you, if you stick to your guns and you stick to your principles, you're going to make a lot of enemies. There's a lot of people in the world that just want to be told what they want to hear. They don't want to be challenged. They don't want to think. And sometimes you have to punch them in the face, rhetorically speaking,
Thank you.
to get them through. I'm not advocating that anybody get punched in the face, rhetorically speaking. But I love it, and I hope you love it too, Michael.
I do. I had a great time today. I had a lot of fun, and that's what I want to do. Is I want to make talk radio entertaining, informative, and fun.
Well, good luck. Thanks. Thanks for being on.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chad Cool, host of the Northland Outdoors podcast. Hey, here in the Northland, we love our time outside. And on the Northland Outdoors podcast, we're going to talk about all of it. Not just fishing, not just hunting, but mountain biking, camping, rock climbing, bird watching, you name it. We're going to have it on the Northland Outdoors podcast. New episodes every 2 weeks on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So look for it and join us on the Northland Outdoors podcast.
All right, finish up our interview with Michael Bell, which I maybe this is inside baseball. I really care about people who do the job. I know people like to turn up their noses at talk radio hosts or opinion writers. Oh, that's just opinion. Well, a lot of people pay attention to us who also like to dismiss us. But I do think that the way we do that is important. And it's not about just making everybody happy all the time. You know, you're not going to get very far in this business being a milquetoast. But on the other hand, there is a way to do it responsibly. And, you know, it sure sounds to me like Michael's going to be somebody who's going to do that. So be sure to tune into his show, KFYR 550. He's on in the mornings. And like I said, I'm going to be on tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. Joining us now, though, is former state senator Tom Campbell, who here at the beginning of an election year is saying some things that sure make it seem like he wants to run for governor. Well, I mean, you're interested, right? I mean, you've acknowledged you're interested. You haven't officially said if you're in the race or not yet, Tom, but tell us a little bit. I mean, what are your ambitions?
Yeah, right. I'm still deciding, and I'm traveling around the state. I was in Bismarck last 2 full days with meetings. I met with, must have been about 13, 15 people or so with very positive outcomes. Just kind of feeling out what the pulses of North Dakota, what the people want, and what their demands are, what they think of Doug and the election, Trump, and all the above, the economy, the pipelines, you know, all the hot buttons that you guys are very familiar with discussing. And it's been fun. I really enjoy it. I really been enjoying being out with the people to see what's on their minds, and it's been good. I've been reaffirmed that I think there's a need. You know, Doug, and I'm not here to bash Doug. Doug's been an okay governor. He's done a good job. He's the 4th pro-business governor we've had in a row. And if it was fortunate enough for me, I'd love to be the 5th pro-business. I think they've all done well, and I've continued to promoting the business interstate, you know, ag and oil, of course. I have a lot of experience in ag and lots of things. But I think, you know, 8 years is probably enough. That's the number one thing people tell me, that it's 8 years. It's 36 or 37 states where the governors have term limits. Of course, our president of the United States is 8 years. It's been since the FDR time. And I just think it's, from what I'm hearing from the people, and I agree with them, that 8 years enough. Let's move on. And I've had, I think I mentioned to you before, Rob, that 2 people have done unofficial polls, one in the East and one in Bismarck, in the last probably month and a half, 2 months, on calling people on what they think, if they'd support Doug or not. And it's been overwhelming, like 100%. The people said, yeah, Doug's been good. He's been a great guy and everything, but it's time to move on. And I think some of that had to do with the presidential campaign. You know, that was great. And you had commented in one of the articles after I visited with you, I did support Doug. And I was at a couple of his campaign for his presidential runs. And, you know, he started off pretty good. Everybody's excited, but then I think everybody realized right from the get-go that it was going nowhere. And he ended up, I think, almost predicting some of the stuff in North Dakota with the small cities and the horses. I think I mentioned to you before, where one of the fellows I know on the East Coast made a comment, do you guys have any cars or big cities in North Dakota? And he was kind of laughing. And he referenced the movie Fargo, which I don't appreciate for Fargo. It didn't, or North Dakota didn't promote North Dakota. And I think we were kind of going down that a little bit. And that's I'm not bashing Doug on that. That's what he chose. And if I would have been in his position, I probably would have chose a different route. And I communicated with him, and he disagreed, obviously. And it was his campaign, his money. He can do whatever he wants. But I think it almost was counterproductive for North Dakota, making us look like a small hick state, you know, no big towns, no cars and stuff. And I was a little bit offended where he just really, really ran on it. Maybe once or twice it'd have been fine, but to just hit it home, that's all it was. The same fellow that I talked to in the East Coast, he said that, and another person from New Hampshire that made a comment that, you know, he spent a lot of money there. And he says, gosh, he says, you know, I don't know if I'd ever want somebody controlling the nuclear buttons of the world that just came from a little town and rode horses. And it wasn't doing any credit, because Doug is, you know, he's from a larger city, and he's tech, and he's very knowledgeable, and he would have made a good president, I think. So I don't think he did himself any favors by continually pounding on that that small town cowboy up deal. And I think that worked against him a little bit. Maybe not, but you can tell with his poll numbers and everything, it just didn't seem to resonate. And of course, the Fargo Farm poll, we discussed as well. That speaks for itself. Didn't surprise me after these two other fellows told me their unofficial poll that he took third place, and then Scott Hennon had a call-in poll I didn't listen to, but he took fourth place in that. And of course, that's skewed with his biased listeners and stuff. But still, as unofficial, there was a lot of people that put him fourth place in our own state. How would you expect to convince the other 49 states, starting with Iowa and New Hampshire, that you should be the president when your home state didn't support you? Third and fourth place at 12%. So that would have been a little devastating for me if I would have come from District 19 as a state senator and wanted to run for state office, whether it's treasurer, auditor, or governor, and my home district put me third or fourth place. I would have said, wow, I would have been just devastated by that. And I think it's because of the 8 years, it's time to move on. And he's been kind of distanced himself the last 6 months. He's been busy campaigning, and he's left North Dakota kind of without a governor in essence. And I just, from what I feel, and I can honestly say this, that I think it's time for him to go out on a high note. You had mentioned in the article today I read about that there's a couple of reasons that he should stick around. One was the Roosevelt Library to sign the ribbon cutting, and I've heard that before. I think that'd be a poor reason, but yet if I was governor, he could sign it. He could cut the ribbon. It wouldn't matter to me. I like the Teddy Roosevelt Library. I'm supporting it. It's a good thing for North Dakota, but that wouldn't be a reason for me to run or not. But I respect your opinion, and I've heard that from other people as well. So I just think that the tea leaves, and there's just so many things that it's not that I'm bashing him, but it's just time to move on, and people are looking for something new and challenging. And I think I'm going to be a man of the people. Instead of a city initiative or a Main Street initiative, I'm going to have a people's initiative if I do run and was elected. I think it's time for the people to be heard, in addition to ag and energy and tech and so forth. So there's been a gap there. And so that's just kind of me and summing it up a little bit, like you had asked.
Tom, with all due respect, I could do an informal poll of 100 people I choose that would say Aaron Oban should be the next governor of North Dakota. I don't really trust informal polls. But in all seriousness, you just said you weren't going to talk about Doug Burgum or bash Doug Burgum when given the chance of why you're going to run for governor. And you just spent 6 straight minutes saying why Doug Burgum should not be elected governor, and spoke very little about why Tom Campbell should be governor. If you're not in this just to bash Doug Burgum, you just wasted 6 minutes. I mean, why do you want to be governor? You're trying to make the case that Doug Burgum shouldn't be, while also saying he was a good governor. It seems like it's a little bit, your message is confusing to me. Why does Tom Campbell think he should be governor?
And as of now, Chad, I haven't decided for sure. So this isn't going to be my stump speech and my disclosure that I'm going to be in today. So I'm still deciding, and I'm working on a lot of those things. I have, as I mentioned, it's going to be focusing on the people. I've got a lot of ideas and lots of things that you guys will be one of the first ones to know when I decide, which is probably coming in the next few weeks. But I do have lots of challenges. I've learned a lot of things from being in the Senate with your wife. I know a lot of people throughout the state, in some of my businesses, and I didn't bash Doug, and I just commented the fact that some of the things that I would have did different, and that I've observed that maybe in his 8 years, the timing was right for him then, but after 8 years, it's just time to move on. So I'm just experiencing that, Chad, from people that I live with. And you're right, those are, as I mentioned, unofficial polls, but they are from two very credible people that know a lot of credible people. One of them was from the East. He did primarily Grand Forks and Fargo. Another one was from Bismarck. And these guys are honest, credible people that actually, one of them is close to Doug. And he wants to talk to Doug and say, hey, Doug, this is maybe a time to go out on a high. So they wouldn't make this up. And as I'm traveling around and visiting with people, I'm finding the same thing. And you're seeing the Fargo Forum poll, the same thing. And I was in Bismarck for 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, and I'm finding the same thing everywhere I go. It's almost unanimous, and it's just people are just wanting to move on. And I think the biggest thing is term limits. what's good for thee is not for me. That concept, even though he can run a third term because he's grandfathered in, but the concept of that is a little bit hypocritical where, he supported that. He supported the 8-year term. You guys know that. And then when he was running the presidential bid, he also signed the presidential pledge, the term pledge, that senators should be limited termed out at 2 years and House people at 3 years. So every one of them signed, except I don't know about Trump because he technically wasn't in the debate, but all the other ones signed. Doug was the last one to sign. So he's been pushing the term limits thing. And I'm thinking that, gosh, if you can't, if it's, if he's believes in term limits, he should abide by him. And I get the grandfather in thing and everything, but I don't buy that. That doesn't make sense to me.
I think that's probably the most cogent criticism you've made of Governor Burgum. I think that is really hard for him. I mean, he campaigned on term limits going all the way back. I mean, you could still find the television ads he ran going all the way back to his 2016 gubernatorial campaign when he was running for president. I mean, at one point he was distributing campaign literature that somebody sent me where he was talking about how he took credit for the term limits ballot measure here in North Dakota. And I mean, he certainly was supportive of it when asked, but I mean, it wasn't like he campaigned for it. I mean, it wasn't like he went out and collected signatures for it, or I don't even think he donated money to the campaign or anything. So I mean, I think the term limits thing, that's a tough thing that he's going to have to explain. How do you say that you support term limits, but here you are running for a third term if he does indeed choose to run for a third term? I asked you back in June when shortly after Governor Burgum got into the presidential race. An obvious question is, well, what happens if it takes off? What happens if he's involved in national politics and he opts not to run for a third term, or he ends up getting elected president? Obviously, he's not going to run for governor while he's running for president. And I asked you, and you said that at that time that you wouldn't run against Doug. Now, obviously, I think you've said differently where, whether Doug runs or not, I realize you haven't made a decision yet, but whether Doug runs or not, I think you've said is not going to factor into your decision. What changed where you're willing to take on Governor Burgum now?
Very fair question. And when you brought that to my attention, to be honest with you, I kind of forgot about that. And so you take good notes and you remember 6 months ago, I remember when you called me and you called Kelly, I think you did an article, both Kelly and I Armstrong. And
yeah.
Kind of what I just alluded to, the fact that the whole environment has changed. The polls, I guess the first thing that made me look at this was people calling me and saying that, the polls, the presidential polls too, or the Fargo Forum poll, and
just to be clear, you keep going, and this is just housekeeping. It's the North Dakota poll, and it was done by the North Dakota News Cooperative. The Forum, we published it as a partner in the poll, but I want to make sure that the right people are getting the right credit for that. Sorry.
Yes, yeah, that was probably one of the huge things was that when I read that, and then just visiting with people. The terms, everything we discussed, all the things were kind of hitting me like, gosh, this is things have, I don't know if they've changed so much, but they just became more aware to me. And I'm thinking like, boy, people are looking for a change. And I think I could be there for that change and listening to the people and bringing, our greatest asset is people in North Dakota. And sometimes not that, I'm going to continue promoting business. I'm Mr. Businessman and ag and lots of things. It's not that I'm going to belittle. I want to be still strong for ag and energy and technology, but yet I think the people have been forgotten a little bit. Times have been a big challenge with inflation, and 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. People forget about that. $1.3 trillion, you guys, on credit card debt. Higher education is almost unaffordable. There's so many of our politicians. I always say 537 of our politicians, the House guys, the Senate, and then Vice President and President, both parties have, with the omnibus bills and stuff, have put us in, $34 trillion of debt that's almost irreversible, that have made things, inflation and so forth, so unaffordable. So I would be here to, in essence, bring back that American dream that my dad, he was a World War II veteran, fought for us, not only bring it back, but probably re-educate it, because there's so many people, and I know a lot of young people, and I visited with a lot of young people, and a lot of them, don't know what all the veterans and my dad in World War II fought, risked their lives for the American dream so we could live it, which we did live it. I did live it, and I enjoyed it, and I thank the veterans and my dad. But a lot of these next generation people aren't aware of it or don't care of it, and I just wanted to be there to re-educate them that there's never been a Russian dream or a North Korea dream or an Iranian dream. It's only been the American dream. And I want to just bring back that home. It's amazing. 7 million people came through the border, Mexican border, and another 2 million discretionary, give or take, roughly 9 million people have spent everything and risked their lives over thousands of miles to come to America. And then we have so many people in America that want to change America. And it's so hypocritical. I would just love to say, okay, every person that's not happy with the United States right now, I'll give you a ticket that you can trade one of those 9 million people that came into the border illegally, and you guys can trade with them. And I'm just here to probably just point some of those things out that, we've got it pretty good. All three of us, in my opinion, won the lottery ticket when we were born in the United States, without a doubt. And so many people, I went on a missionary trip last year, about a year ago, to Cuba. And the only way you can get there is through a missionary trip. And that's third world country. And up until 1959, that was a prosperous country. A lot of people had beautiful homes there. And when it became socialism and Castro and so forth, the story, it's third world country right now. It's very depressing. And that's 90 miles from the United States. They got a beautiful climate. They could have agricultural theme. They could be growing crops, 3 crops a year. But yet, look what happened. And that's 90 miles from the Keys, from Florida.
So Tom, hearing all this, that makes me think maybe you should have run for president. Because these are all very national issues. I don't want to step on Chad's toes. I think he's got a question.
I was going to say the same thing. Tom, you ran for the Senate in 2018 for a short time. You ran for the House. You're talking about federal issues. You also have some, I think, political issues that you're going to have to deal with if you decide to get in this issue, this race. I actually prepare for these interviews, which might be crazy to people, but I was looking at some stuff. And when you were running for the Senate, the NRSC evidently said that they weren't excited about your campaign because of some stuff in the research book, including being sued for fraud for an insurance policy obtained for your mother. You sold land to Bill Gates. In this article in the Washington Examiner, it referenced foreclosing North Dakota farmers when you were a banker. How do you get, those are hard things to explain, and I guarantee those things will be used in a campaign against you. How do you handle those kind of issues when those are tough political things to deal with?
Mm-hmm. No, and those are good points, and thank you for bringing them up, because I have addressed all those issues, and they're positive. There's nothing illegal. They're all positive. They're all legal things we did, and I have answers to all those things that to me, the experiences that I was in with them would only, I think, complement my run for governor. So the Gates issue was our family decided that to sell the land to him, and it was to one of his entities, and we've leased it back long term, and it allows us to use that money to develop it in real estate, which my son and my brother's sons are in real estate, so we're diversified, and which is about 4 or 5 times return, and it also allows us to keep farming. When I pull in the fields, I even forget that we don't own them anymore because we have a long-term lease. It's just like we still own them. It makes us and allows us to focus, to continue on growing, potatoes and wheat and soybeans and stuff like we really love doing. And you can't take the land with you. So it's been a great step that we did. It allowed us to the 1031 exchange. So that was a very positive thing I think I did. And I'd love to get a chance to talk to anybody, because I've addressed this before, and I knew this was coming. I'm not
right.
I'm very aware of these things. So and my mother's life insurance, that was anybody that's going to use that, my mother's death and a political thing, we sued the life insurance companies because they didn't pay. So that was a bad deal on their part. So we that was an interesting thing. So these are all things, and I don't think you're going to find anybody with, I wouldn't say skeletons. These are just issues in life. If you were out as an entrepreneur experiencing life and had nothing, and these are all perfectly legal, perfectly upfront things. We did nothing wrong, and we followed the laws. and that's the risks you take in life. So I think those are positive things as me with living an experienced life of business, starting out at 16 years old, custom combining, and getting a loan, starting a potato farm from scratch right out of high school. These are the things that I experienced in looking at life. I've had lots of ups and downs. I failed a lot of businesses and was successful at a few. And fortunately, we stayed ahead enough from going broke. Never was a Donald Trump, never went broke. And I always disagree with him on that, where he bragged that he said, "Oh, I did nothing illegal," but well, come on, the banks didn't. So I don't totally agree with him on that. But we never did go broke, but we had lots of scares in our lifetime. And we were never ahead of it so far that I could just sit back. So it made us really humble and appreciate, God, in essence. Our faith was strong because we were always, farming can be very risky. We started different potato farms throughout the United States, and it was a challenge. We made some money, we lost a lot of money. And without, Babe Ruth was a home run king, but he also was a strikeout king. And I struck out a lot of times, and I think I can use those losses and challenges in life as experience, because anybody that hasn't struck out or swung at something, that means he didn't go up to bat, in essence. So I look at those things as a positive, Chad. But great, thanks for the question.
Well, one thing you've said is that North Dakotans are wanting change. So let's imagine you decide to run for governor. It's 2025, January. Legislature's coming into session, and Tom Campbell is in the governor's office in Bismarck. How are things going to be different?
Well, that's a good question, and not 100% change. There's lots of things that we're with our budgets and stuff. We have a lot of money, the legacy fund and so forth. It's going to be interesting. Some of the things that the hot buttons is the Rick Becker property tax elimination, that measure. My answer to that would be, as several other states do, I would support and sign a bill that came to me that would put a cap on property taxes at 1.5% or 2%, irregardless of the appraised value. So it kind of just freezes it where it's at. And I've talked to many people that own a lot of land, that have several houses, and some that don't. And I think that would be a fair way to kind of just freeze this craziness right now, that these appreciated values have increased taxes so much with people's homes, and they're so frustrated. So I can see Rick Becker, his point, but yet to go at zero, that's 60 or 70% of North Dakota.
I was going to ask, you don't support them. I mean, obviously you're talking like you feel like the measure is going to fail.
Well, I don't know if I think it will, because I think somebody had told me, I don't know how credible it was, but more than 50% of the people would not support it. But a lot of things in there make sense. People are frustrated. And I think if we froze that at 1 or 1.5%, I think, and I've got a lot of likes on that, and several other states have done that with success. So that would kind of freeze it. So that'd be one of the things that I would really support, because that's when I went door banging when I was running, and your wife would probably say the same thing, Chad. The number one issue, even back many years ago, was property taxes. It wasn't income taxes, it wasn't anything else, but it was property taxes. And income taxes, people take that out every check, so you don't notice as much. Property taxes, it's huge. If you write it one time or two times a year, and that's what gets people frustrated, and that's a huge thing. So that would be my answer there, and I think that would be a fair way to look at it. Another thing that I would support, our job shortages right now is anywhere between 20 and 30,000 or whatever. I think South Dakota is 15,000 short. And I have a lot of experience with hiring H-2A workers in our farms and some of our businesses that's been very successful. It's limited to 9 months. There's always been a housing issue that goes right along with that. And with my experience in hiring, needing workforces, and also I have some good connections up in Canada that have been very, very successful right across the border from us, from Grafton. It's only about 40 miles. The town of Winkler has been very successful in the last 30 years of hiring, in essence, H-2A people. It's a different format there, but I've got a lot of experience.
H-2A is basically a visa designation, right? For
correct, yeah, for 9 months
for foreign workers.
And
right.
It's been very successful. The housing shortage, I think I could solve some of that with just new starter homes. You can buy a pre-built home, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, for under $100,000, and it's a home. And with the support of the Bank of North Dakota or the Workforce Authority, if you amortize it over 40 years, interest only for 5 years, like HUD does, our federal government does that. So I'm not starting something new. This has been successful programs. You could get your payment owning a brand new home, not a trailer home, but an own new home for under $500 a month. And so those are some things that with my banking experience and just my workforce experience, farming, agriculture, real estate, I think I bring a lot of things to the plate that would have some good answers. And I would promote that can happen. I've talked to people in those industries, the modern home industries, that you don't have to worry about workforce, building homes and construction people that'll start and finish in a year and so forth. These are things that can happen right now. And there's a lot of cities that would be close to the hubs where the workers are shortage that would give you free lots in essence to expand their city. There's going to be a lot of little issues and problems. It's not quite that simple, but that would be a start, I think, for our workforce shortage, which is huge right now. You guys know that, and our housing insurance, which just goes hand in hand with it. And I think I had to have a good answer. I can't back this up, but if we're short 20,000 workers, I think the H-2A, the non-skilled workers, I think I could personally, and I'm going to get involved in these things. I'm not just going to hire a committee and go away. I'm a grassroots, frontline worker, and I'm going to be involved in this personally, spending time. And I think I could fill a lot of these jobs. I've got connections and people that are working on this right now. I think I could personally fill, with the help of these committees and stuff, 10 or 15,000 people, these non-skilled workers. So that would be some of the things that I would support that are the hot buttons. The teacher shortage. I love the Senate bill, 2032 or whatever it was, 2030. They gave $3 million to re-educate for education. I think that's right on the right move. I got some ideas there too. And teachers, we have to change the whole format a little bit, where the teachers need to have a little bit more control in the classroom and to get people interested back in. It's not just salaries. That's a big part of it, but there's other issues too that I could address with that, because that's a big deal. I think the medical school in Grand Forks, even though I'm an MDSU Bison guy, I'm kind of from Grand Forks, and I love, Dr. Wynn's retiring. Our medical school and our law school right now, which are two huge assets, the medical school, there's several neighboring states that do not have medical schools, and there's a doctor shortage and there's a nurse shortage. I'd love to double those and provide more doctors and more lawyers. There's a lawyer shortage right now. And you probably guys are aware of that, as much as some people don't care for certain practices of law, but there's a shortage. And I think
nobody likes a lawyer till they need one.
Yeah. Hey, I know we're running.
I'm glad you finished my sentence. So.
Yeah, we're running short on time, but I have one. Like I said, I did some research before this. Tom, if I recall, you were in Washington on January 6th of 2021, but had left before any of the stuff started. I don't know how to describe it differently. So my question for you is: were you gone by the time the stuff started? And do you think Joe Biden was he elected president in November of 2020?
Well, actually, ironically, I did leave about 9 or 10 that morning. I got there the day before, and because I had no clue what was going on, and I just walked through when President Trump was talking, and he had a lot of good people talking, and it was at the other end of the mall. It was like, that mall is like 2 miles long from the Capitol, and I was just walking. I caught an Uber flight or an Uber, and I flew out about 9 or 10, and I didn't realize it until I went from Reagan, Washington, D.C. airport to Chicago to Fargo. And I had no clue. And when my flight landed in Chicago, my phone blew up. It was like everybody, even including one sister, she says, "Were you behind that, or what's going on? Are you there?" and everything. And I was the last one to know, because I was at 35,000 feet when it happened. But so, and I do not believe that Trump had anything to do with that. He was, I can honestly say that. It's like, come on, he's better than that. As far as Biden winning election, there's a lot of indications they're still coming out that it was skewed. I don't know, the Pennsylvania, we could talk about that for days, Chad. In some fashions, I think it may have been. In other fashions, we got to move on. It's over. But I know some people that still think that it was rigged and it was a bad deal. But I don't know. What do you guys think? It's one of those things that at this point in time, it doesn't matter. Let's just fix it so we don't, if there was a problem, that we don't have it again this summer for our primary and our general this fall.
I think that President Trump had plenty of opportunities before courts of law with some very high-profile lawyers to bring evidence that the election was stolen, and he didn't. He didn't bring any evidence, and I think that extraordinary claims that are made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. I don't, just because people are still talking about it, I don't think it matters. And I mean, that's what I feel. Also, by the way, our two senators, Kevin Kramer and John Hoeven, both voted to certify the election. They're satisfied that it was not stolen. And our Congressman Kelly Armstrong voted to certify the election. He's also satisfied. So no, I don't think there's anything to it. I think there's plenty of talk on the internet. There's also a lot of people who think the world's flat. I don't know and they think they have evidence of that too. So I don't know what to say about it. People are going to say what they're going to say. I think the best part of what you said on that is it's time to move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm sorry, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
Just one last thing. I told you this before, Rob, that when I ran for United States Senate in the House, I was told by my consultants that from the East Coast not to talk to Mike McFeely or Rob Port. And so I kind of had blocked you off, and I already told you this. And when you called, it was a different cell number from back a few years ago. But I did tell you that I'm not going to listen to that consultant anymore. I'm open to you guys, and I love to talk with you. So far, this has been 2 or 3 times, and I'm going to be open at any time to talk to you guys because I don't write. But that's the way I was directed, and I was kind of a little more vulnerable back then. But
I'm biased, but I feel like that was bad advice. So I'm happy.
I don't know, Rob. Sometimes I feel like people shouldn't talk to you.
Well, maybe not. Tom, I really appreciate you coming on. And as this unfolds, if you end up in this race, I'm sure we'll be talking again. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for this opportunity, you guys.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.